for their work on Day in the Park. The piñata was really cute, and Barbara did a really good job getting people to do the carbon footprint. The kids were interested in, coloring and glitter and sticking sticky stuff on, and it was good. Low turnout, I felt, compared to years gone by. Probably a combination of the heat and hardly strictly bluegrass and a bunch of other stuff going on that weekend. And, the constant competition with all the activities that the kids do, like soccer and everything.
Yeah.
But it was enjoyed. One thing, though, in the future, I wouldn't use glitter glue or those little things that get all over the lawn, because I spent a lot of time picking them up afterwards.
Yeah, so did Gregory and I.
Yeah.
Perhaps, Natalie, we could place a real rehashing of the community festival on our November agenda. I don't want to spend too much time on it today.
Yeah.
But thank you for your kind words, Michelle. Okay.
Is there a subcommittee that works on the festival?
Yeah, that was Kima and I. Not that we did a whole lot of work.
No. But that might be a good place to start to talk about if you want to do things different next year.
Okay. Yeah. Since we were bad children and didn't meet before the community festival, maybe we can meet after the community festival.
We're meeting before the next one.
Yes.
So
yes.
being very proactive.
Yes. And talk about that. So if Natalie could please send out an email in the next couple of days to schedule Kima and I, help us get scheduled, that would be appreciated. So the next item on our agenda is work plan prioritization. Natalie was very kind to do the tallying of the votes.
I finally prioritized mine just before the meeting.
I was, I must kick myself because I was going to ask her if there was an easy way we could list things by number. So put all of our ones together and put all our twos together, and I don't know if that would have taken a lot of word processing, but I think it would have been interesting to see what got ranked where. But maybe that was just too much paperwork. Maybe we just need to get on with it. It sounds like from Ray Miller and Lori's letter that the Southeast Ridge and the Ridgeline and open space plan are important to the city council. So
And I think they're important to all of us as well.
yes, yes.
Couple comments.
Yes, please.
On the work plan, that's a great idea, and that's kind of a staff direction was to then take this list and put the ones on the top, and maybe we draw a line and see how many things we think we can manage in a year, because this is a pretty comprehensive or exhaustive list of items. So that's definitely, we thought that would be a good thing to do after this council liaison meeting.
Okay.
Because they might have some direction, and we can come up with that list. And those two letters about the Brisbane Acres are kind of specifically about number 5 on your agenda, but they also obviously are talking about more than that. So they're there because they wanted you to know their feedback about number 5 on your agenda.
Yeah, yeah. So,
Do you mean the letters we got today?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So, does anybody want to have any input on our work prioritization plan? Did you have a chance to read through this? And were there things that you felt came up much lower than you personally felt they should have come up, or, were unexpectedly high?
I think that when I looked at it, one thing that I because I had the advantage of seeing the scores before I just wrote all my scores. And one thing that's interesting is in some cases, I didn't even want to rate something because it's not something that we're going to get around to, so why give it a 1 through 5? It's just like pick 1 and 2, and go on from there, even though we want to do all of them. And some of them, like on pollution, like I care a lot about water pollution. but is it something that we can have an impact on?
Yeah, exactly.
So, I'm not going to rate that. I'm going to go for the things like, acquisition, acres, Levinson property. That's like number one for me in vegetation management for city-owned spaces. Okay? So acquisition, once we have the acquisition of the property, then we can implement the vegetation management. And then invasive species control. The other things, those all come after or as part of. Like community stewardship kind of goes with invasive species, but vegetation mapping, by the time you're done mapping it, it's gone because we didn't preserve it. So that was kind of how I looked at it when I was looking at this, and especially with things like, energy conservation. Renewable energy generation is one of the things that we can have an impact on. And energy conservation as well, even though I think the other things are really important. So when I rated them, I thought back about what things could we have the most impact on, rather than rating them 1 through 5 or 1 through 6, and overall the importance of these categories. Well, water isn't the number one importance for me, but can we really impact it? I still wrote number 1, but in other words, the topics weren't, what was the topic? Was the topic the overall importance of these categories, but what is the category? Is the category what we're going to do with water, or waste and recycling, or Brisbane Lagoon, that kind of thing? So some of it was hard to determine. Landscaping, the approved tree list, it's important, but it's kind of way down on the list when it comes to priorities, because if you don't have landscape principles and guidelines about non-natives and natives and everything else, that should feed what the tree list should be about. And it goes on from there. So although this was interesting, I think we should go back and say, what's the number 1, number 2 thing that we want to do in each of the categories, and then focus on those.
Yeah.
And in some cases, maybe everything in the category is important, and in other cases, they outrank some other category based on what we can actually accomplish, rather than spread ourselves too thin.
Yeah. Glenn, please.
I had some similar issues with it. I thought it was very confusing, and for instance, looking at just the second block on the first page, energy, global warming, and carbon emissions as an issue, I think that's very important. Education and outreach are kind of one of the means that we would use to tackle that issue, and so, should they be really separate categories, or are we talking about means and ends here? So it was a very strange exercise to me, and my impression afterwards was we need to redo our work plan. There's all sorts of divisions, not all of which make sense. It's very confusing. I don't know.
And one of the things where we could have an impact, it should be doing, is reviewing the general plan update, because that sets the framework for everything else that goes on afterwards. And that's very important. It's very important because with the general plan, we can set guidelines for how we frame global warming and energy and all of that other thing within the city limits.
Mike, do you have anything you'd like to contribute? Thanks. How about Kima?
Yeah. I would echo some of the comments of my fellow council members that it seems like there's a lot of things here and there's some overlap, and it's also, I just think, the amount of things in here are maybe unmanageable, for this body to really take on, but by prioritizing the ones that, we can have the most change, or that we can affect the most change. So while on one hand, I would argue that global warming and carbon emissions is, I would, argue it's the most important thing, but our ability to affect it is not as much as, for instance, your idea to review the general plan. And so if we are going to winnow out the items, I would propose doing it based on where we can actually make a difference. And surely we could find a way to make a difference on global warming. That would be time well spent. So I'm not saying we put that to the side. I'm just saying we look at where we can. It's kind of the low-hanging fruit principle. Where can you make the most impact with the least effort? Because there's going to be a lot of effort required in sum total.
So I kind of think maybe on this plan we should maybe, I don't know, go through each section and say what's the most important thing that we can affect as a group in each section. So, for example, on the first section, sustainability analysis for the Baylands, review of Baylands draft environmental impact report, update green building ordinance, or habitat conservation renewal. Although the HCP is very close to my heart, we're not going to have much of an impact there. That's already being handled by other people. And basically, U.S. Fish and Wildlife has, whatever we decide, they can overrule us. Updated the green building ordinance, I think that's really important, but that's already way in process, and at this point, I think it's to the Planning Commission, or
It's really been, the green building ordinance seems to be superseded by state standards, and so I think that process is, at least it's been recommended to us that it's pretty much over.
yeah, and then review the Baylands draft environmental. I'm afraid we've spent way too much time on that already. So that kind of leaves sustainability analysis for the Baylands, which I think is pretty important.
Yeah, and it's also the highest rated there. So it looks like the collective sort of judgment of the committee already recognized that.
And then for the second section, I feel that all of these are really important, but number one is the general plan because that frames everything that the city does. And then I feel like number two is a vegetation management for the city-owned space because that at least we can help to implement. Education outreach, that's ongoing. So in global warming, like Kima said, we can't do anything about it, and reports to the city council, well, I think that's up to our staff member to help keep the council informed of all the trouble we're causing.
Sure, and can I interject here?
Uh-huh.
On the comments that I've heard so far, staff agrees that I understood that this was kind of a plan that had evolved from the committees and has kind of been a list of things that the committees wanted to do for years, but I agree that there are apples and oranges together on this list, and some of it fits and some of it doesn't, but a few of the things I'm not on. How about that? I'm not close enough. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bar, do I have to lean over? You guys are tasked with doing, and you're speaking about some of them. When these general plan updates are drafted, you guys are tasked with reviewing them, and the council's going to want you to do that. And the energy action plan, I'm sure they're going to reinforce tonight. They want something to be done on that. And vegetation management is an annual process that the Open Space and Ecology Committee oversees. So those will all be, it's good that you are all saying that because those are all on the top of the list.
Yeah, I think we inherited a lot of wish list for many years, and at this point, Glenn's the only one of us that has tenure in this group. That long-standing tenure. Kima and I both came on 3.5 years ago, and Barbara too. So, and we've never had the opportunity to work through the work plan because we spent an entire year basically doing the draft EIR.
Right.
So let us know if we step out on then something we're.
Yeah, I think there's definitely, now I can hear. So definitely time to talk about this if you want before we get the council subcommittee. But if you guys would prefer, staff can put the number ones on the top and we can talk about it after this meeting with the council liaisons and then draw our line on the things that we expect to be able to do in a year. But if you want to have more discussion, I think you have a half an hour here, so.
I'm also concerned about the number of things we need to get through before our liaison committee shows up. While all of these things, all of this the points made by this committee, I think, are all very valid and very important. I think the real issue is that we needed to have finished this ballot a month or two ago and had this conversation at the preceding meeting. However, things being what they are, I would like to go on to number 4 and 5 and 6, and then come back to number 3 if we can.
Can I just make one sort of comment on Karen's thing? You know, there are some things which the council is expecting of us, and maybe if we could identify those and put those in a separate category, because that's sort of our commitment or our responsibility to the council. And then there's another group of things which have been added on aspirationally or because they're of interest to, one or more committee members. But if we could identify the things that the committee is actually tasked with doing, like I think you mentioned a couple of them there, that might be a good place to start, and then we can see what we have room for beyond those things.
Oh, that's a great plan. And then hopefully the individual ones that meet your guidelines are of interest to a majority of the committee, ideally.
I personally feel it's very important for the committee to be able to tackle some of our own projects. I mean, we don't get paid. So being able to tackle some things that we care about is very important.
Yeah.
I think just in terms of morale.
Yeah.
But we also need to do what the city needs us to do. So with that in mind, let's roll along to the Levinson property. Natalie, can you bring us up to speed on where we're at with that?
As far as our information, Mountain Watch is working on the priority conservation area. I sent out the information that Fanny worked on in a council meeting maybe a month and a half ago. So that includes all the information that she presented to council. As far as I understand, Mountain Watch is basically contacting surrounding cities to make sure that they'll be on board with a priority conservation area.
Yeah, and part of that involves mapping of what we consider to be priority conservation areas. And, my great concern is that we make sure that areas...
Being kind of quiet.
Oh, make sure that areas like the Levinson property and the Peking Handicraft property are designated as priority conservation areas. That doesn't mean that they're preserved by any means. It just means that they're not a priority development area and slated as such. And it affects a lot of things, just not even just the grants and everything else, but areas that are priority development areas. The state looks at that when they're assigning housing numbers and RENA numbers. And we want to make sure that priority conservation areas that we want to conserve, are not on the table for priority development areas. So it's a balancing act.
And that's correct, right, that Mountain Watch is the one who's submitting the application, and that what the council did, and you mentioned Fanny, was adopt a resolution in support. I don't know if the open space, I think it was the planning director I was speaking to, said the Open Space and Ecology Committee could then have a letter also of support if you wanted to do that, something to go further. And I also see that it's on the list of questions for the council liaison, so they might have further feedback on what they're doing.
So, addressing the committee here, other than the letter of support, are there any goals or immediate action items for us concerning the Levinson property? Or is this basically being taken care of by San Bruno Mountain Watch, because we don't want to duplicate efforts?
The status of it as a priority conservation area is being worked on by Mountain Watch.
Okay.
The actual conservation of it, I think the committee needs to work on and help convince the city that this is a high priority area that we want to acquire.
Does that come before or after having it or concurrent with having it?
Concurrent.
It's concurrent.
Yeah, because if we wait for, at any point, we could get applications to develop.
Okay.
So the sooner that we take the initiative and try to preserve the area in any way that we can, because it is kind of a linchpin for a lot of other stuff in that area.
What do you envision that meaning? I mean, Mary suggested that we apply for grants. I mean,
Yes, we should, and getting the PCA status is an important step in getting the grants. So we're working on that, but also getting city support in trying to actually acquire the land as well is, I think, a good step that the city wants to acquire it, or that we want to preserve it.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah,
The property isn't for sale?
no, it's not.
So how are we going to buy something that's not for sale?
Well, there are ways to buy property that's not yet for sale, and also to make, intent known that we want to conserve it. And I don't know, miracles happen, Michael, but if we don't take steps, it won't happen.
Okay.
so aside from writing a letter to the council, how do you envision the first steps? I'm a little bit at a loss as to.
I don't know yet. I really don't know. I mean, one of the first steps is to get priority conservation status for all of San Bruno Mountain, including that property. The second step, I think, is to make it known to the council and get public support that we do not want to develop that particular area developed. That it's very important for the kind of whole plan, open space plan for San Bruno Mountain, and start working towards that and make sure that everybody has a common vision and a common goal of preserving that. And I think
So
that's
getting
really
back to
important.
the action plan and the priority of things we can and can't do.
Mm-hmm.
What we can do on this is we can get it designated. That's
Yes.
about all we can really do.
And solicit council support for,
We should really focus our energy in that direction.
yeah,
Because
Yeah.
it's probably not going to come for sale for
Yeah.
who knows how long.
who knows?
So it sounds like we should draft a letter to the council or pass a resolution out of this committee to be forwarded to the council.
Okay, wait, can I interject? The first thing would be to, and it is on the list, to talk to the council liaisons
Sure.
and get their feedback. And when I suggested a letter, it was a letter in support of the priority conservation area to go along with the Mountain Watch application.
Right.
That's what I was saying.
But Barbara asked the question, is that all we need to do? And
So let's
the answer
get-
is no.
Yeah, but getting direction from the council liaison seems like they're
An important
coming
part,
in
yes.
20 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, I just, I'm not sure how much we can do as long as it's in private hands. I understand you wanting to preserve it so that the property does not continue to be degraded while it's going through this process, but I don't know what we can do. So,
Well, I will, ask the experts and come back with a.
great. And in the meantime, we will speak to our liaisons, and we will, perhaps we could have a subcommittee to work on the letter of support to go to San Bruno Mountain Watch.
Mm-hmm.
Does everybody feel like a subcommittee would be a good? It should be a pretty short and sweet subcommittee, so jump on this one, you guys.
Yeah, I guess that would be me and Glenn. Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Unless someone else is burning to do that.
Okay. Well, I think we just created a subcommittee,
Great.
and the subcommittee, of course, will take their direction from the council this evening and then write a letter. Okay, grand. We got something accomplished.
Is everyone's microphone on?
Mine is got a green light. Can you hear me?
Mine's got a green light.
Mine does.
Okay, just checking.
Can't hear you very well. Oh, now I can, I guess.
They seem like they're a little low or something. I don't know.
Technical troubles.
Yeah. So, lot coverage and interior courtyards, number 5. I believe my memory tells me that we were primarily going to address this issue to the liaisons. Is there anything we need to speak about prior to their arrival?
Let me jump in on this one too. After the last meeting, there were a couple of sentences specifically drafted, and I said, let me take that and look at it. And I've kind of gotten direction that we would want to, at a policy level, ask the council to direct the planning commission to change that part of the code, not
Okay.
to write code that then, if the planning commission writes different code, then it has to come back to us, and then it has to go back to them, but to, as a policy, say we want interior courtyards not included in the lot coverage calculation. And then the council liaisons have also let us know that they have opinions that are similar, and those were in the 2 documents that got added to your packet. So I think they're prepared to talk about that when they come in, and they're saying they're looking at a bigger picture and they're on the same page. So I don't know if we have to formally recommend it or not, and I think that's what we can ask them.
Okay.
I think we should formally recommend it, but at the same time, I think that it would be very helpful to the Planning Commission if we were very specific in our request
Yeah.
of how we are stating it, because we've had some challenges in the past with the ambiguity of some of the,
Direction.
yeah.
I've
And so
Good about
that was our intent of being very specific, which is why we worked on the actual language with Stuart and with, hopefully, with you.
Yeah.
So did the directive come from the,
well, I don't know if I would say directive, but maybe direction or guidance was to, both from the planning director and from the council liaisons, that the Open Space and Ecology Committee, when it goes into zoning ordinances, if they have a policy level recommendation, that's more appropriate than rewriting lines of the ordinance.
well, I think that Stuart crafted that, or helped us craft that to codify what we were actually asking for,
Yeah.
rather than, rewriting it ourselves, but
Yeah.
to be very specific about the ask and why.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's see where, I can be very specific. That's my specialty is detail, so I'll
Okay.
make sure that it does get done right.
I too, I sort of concur with Michelle and Stuart that specific example language I felt that was a good idea, because if we can I feel like if we do some of the legwork, maybe we increase the chances of getting something that we feel is going to address the issue and maybe eliminate some of their workload and make it a little easier for them. Although definitely it would be up to council and the planning commission to either adopt or not the specific language. So,
And it's interesting because we've already, lollygagged on this issue for months now.
yeah,
And the longer we wait, the more vulnerable we are to new development plans coming forth and being put before the planning director, the planning commission, and the council. So I'd kind of like to light a fire on this one, and that was our motivation for actually writing the language.
yeah.
Okay, I think, I could be wrong, but my understanding is that with these 2 papers or explanations or opinions from the council members that are our liaisons, that they feel strongly about it too. And I don't think that we can use the reason that we're taking some of the workload off the planning commission. If it's their jurisdiction, it's their jurisdiction.
Yeah.
And we have, a certain place in commenting on some of the things that they are a commission to oversee. But I don't think, that being said, I don't think anybody's in disagreement about what you guys want as a concept. That's my understanding, is I think everybody's behind the same concept. And yeah, maybe it hasn't happened yet. I can't speak to that because I haven't been here that long, but we can make sure that it happens.
Okay. Is there anything else we'd like to address vis-a-vis lot coverage, courtyards, before we talk to our liaisons?
Do we want to discuss the documents that they sent
Sure.
as part of that?
I think this is as good a place as any to do that. I think that's a very good suggestion, Michelle. Did everybody have time to read those today? Unfortunately, they just came out, so no shame if you didn't. I got them about 5:30.
That's the letters from Lori and Ray.
Correct.
Huh?
Mike, are you good?
Yep.
Okay, great. Who would like to start off the discussion?
Well,
Actually, I had a question. I think I understand, but I just wanted confirmation. In his letter, Ray mentions density transfers, and I've heard the term, but could anybody just kind of clarify specifically what that means? My understanding, it means kind of building more density lower, in the main part of town, as opposed to having it up high, so that the net result is the same amount of housing units, but the density has been transferred down. Is that
That's what I thought it meant.
okay?
correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it came about because people there wanted to build. The acres are limited in the number of units or, housing you can build per acre in the
Right.
Brisbane acres, and some of the Brisbane acres include area that goes all the way down to Bay Shore. So some people wanted to build more housing units down below, and other people wanted less housing up above to preserve the habitat. And so they came up with this idea of a density transfer, where if you owned acres up above and you owned acres down below, you could preserve the acre up above and build twice as much down below, or get like a 2-for-1. You could build like 4 instead of 1 and 1.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, and the density transfer thing has been pretty much, the opportunities there have been pretty much exhausted, but there was also resistance from people who felt that that would induce a lot of development on the acres that are the backside of Tulare Hill, and in an area that is probably geologically unstable.
Right.
But I'm not a USGS, expert. But that's the word on the street, and that's the evidence. That's
Well, there has been that one kind of slide there.
major landslide.
When did that happen?
I think it happened around 1910 or 1920, something like. I don't know.
Yeah, I believe it was when they were grading Bay Shore,
It was actually,
or shortly thereafter.
Yeah. Okay, but that
Yeah.
general time frame, it wasn't
Yeah, it was-
in the 60s or 70s.
no,
Okay.
wasn't in my lifetime. How's that?
Okay.
That's a long time now.
So 1910.
Not quite. And so that's what Ray was talking about
Okay.
on that part
Yeah.
of it.
Okay.
I guess how I feel is that I think that the Brisbane Acres is still a viable zoning unit, because the desire to preserve the Brisbane Acres, especially the upper acres, is still very much, I think, desirable. And because it is a separate already zoning area, it gives you an opportunity to implement this, for example, just as an example, this particular requirement about the courtyards, because normal city ordinances across all of the cities, based on research by our own team, says that everybody allows the interior courtyards to count as open space. But I feel that the Brisbane Acres is a special area because of the fact that it is part of the habitat. And one of the other things that Dr. Miller brings up in here is about, does it still make sense to have 40% of the properties, a property open, as opposed to designating 40% of the total area as being open? And that's a tough one, because one of the things that we had hoped to achieve with that is to still have wildlife and habitat to be able to intermingle and allow flyways, and not to set definitive lines defining that's habitat and this is not, because that really closes in and doesn't allow the habitat to. But the way it is being in practice with current fire management and a lot of other things, it's kind of working that way in a lot of ways. It's really a tough call, because the other thing he says, maintain the visual beauty of the mountain, the ridgelines, the hilltops, and planting habitat, including the Brisbane Acres. The policy closest is Policy 83 that urges the city to. maintain the visual beauty. The visual beauty is very important, but what's even more critical is maintaining a living habitat. So while you might preserve the open space and the visual space, and wow, doesn't that golf course look beautiful? You're not preserving the biodiversity or the living habitat when you preserve that kind of open space, as opposed to viable living habitat that all the species can live on and not just the butterfly or whatever. So I'm having a hard time with that one. And the same thing with the whole ridgelines. The ridgeline ordinance,
Michelle, would it be okay for Glenn to interject?
yeah, but I just wanted to say one other thing about the ridgeline ordinance, and that's that the ridgeline ordinance, to me, not just preserves the views of the ridgeline, but the ridges are extremely important for the butterflies mating. They do this like ridgeline kind of mating dance that Calippi do, and if they don't have ridgelines, they don't mate.
All I was going to say is that I think I disagree a little bit about the saving 40% on every parcel. I mean, I like wildlife in Brisbane too, but if we're talking about endangered species in particular, I kind of take the word of the biological consultant that from a habitat point of view, a consolidated 40% of the area makes much more sense. And so I think especially if we're talking about endangered species, that has, for me, that has priority over, preserving just wildlife in general, which I also like. But I think it seems generally true that the larger a chunk you can set aside for wildlife, generally the better off we are.
Yeah, and I could understand that, and I kind of agree with that, but when you do that, how are you going to do that? Because even what Ray says is, how are you going to do that? Because you don't own the top 40% of the lots. You own a mishmash of lots for acres, and other people own other acres. And so if you take away that part of it before you've got that part of it secured, you've got to catch 22 and you're screwed. Okay, and you have development like what happened on San Diego Court, which cut off main trails coming down from the mountain, cut them off completely. I ended up in somebody's backyard. I had no idea that they had just completely cut off all the trails.
Now,
And
is 40% actually enough?
No.
Because you're talking about a piece of property that's an acre. And my property is only 25 by 100. And you're only going to conserve 40% of that? I mean, how big does your house need to be?
Well, no, I think that's specific to the
It's specific to the acre.
specific to the acres.
Each acre is an acre of land, and you're going to conserve 40%. So you have 60% to build your mega home.
I don't think that
So then there's lot setbacks, so maybe you get to build a 50% of an acre?
no, 40% of the area be set aside for habitat purposes.
Well, what are you going to do with the other 60%?
Well, you could
Your
theoretic-
landscaping,
you could make a
your
lawn,
house,
yeah.
your
Driveway,
your
your excessive number of parking spaces that are required by the
Your-
city of Brisbane.
your
your,
road.
It's
your
still
pool.
a huge hunk
Yes.
of property. It's
I think
still
we all
3
wish it
times
was
than
bigger,
my
but-
piece of property. So I don't know.
I have to say,
It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
I'm not a biologist by any means, but I think I agree with Glenn that the contiguous area is preferable for conservation of species than spreading it out, because then you are going to have these pockets of potential development, which will create barriers or interruptions in the habitat.
But the level of density creates barriers as well. That's one of the reasons that at the Northeast Ridge, they're not supposed to have solid fences. They're supposed to have this open habitat for butterfly fly-through, all this other stuff. Whether it works or not, I guess we're going to find out with Calippi Hill. But that was the intent.
Yeah.
And the same thing with being able to fly over over the industrial park from one side to the other. Because when you build these mega developments, you essentially build a wall that most flying animals can't get through, and you put up fences that a lot of everybody but the raccoons can't get through. And so you effectively isolate these populations, and then you end up with islands that blink out. And the whole idea was to prevent that from happening.
Right. I was at those meetings where that was discussed, and it's a nice idea, but we don't really know if it's going to work.
We know the other doesn't work. We know that when you cut off the population with a wall of houses, that's that.
Okay. I feel like everybody has really good points here. I'm not sure we're going to resolve this issue tonight. Is there anything else that we would like to discuss regarding these two letters?
I
We
did
have Ray here. I'm not sure if he's allowed to answer questions yet or not.
I did have another question on the last sentence in Lori's letter. It says, in response to public testimony, we should consider amending the ordinance regarding lot coverage so interior courtyards are not included in square footage.
Yeah.
My understanding is that
Should be.
that it should be included, and the not kind of is
Contradicts.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is that everybody else's understanding?
Yeah, I think I even
Because
read it the other way.
currently the interior courtyards are not included, and what we want to do is change that.
Right.
Right.
I'm just going to throw out on Lori, since we're mostly talking about Lori's thing right here. I felt like largely preserve was more ambiguous than preserve. I felt like that was a step in the wrong direction. If we're preserving something, we're preserving it. Or at least our ambition is to preserve it, I think, 100%, if it's to say to preserve it. But if you say you're going to largely preserve it, then that to me is somewhere between 50 and 95. It seems to me more ambiguous instead of less ambiguous.
Yeah,
I agree with
I'd
you.
agree with that. I mean, I don't disagree with the intent to strengthen it. I just don't think that
That doesn't really strengthen it.
right.
No, I think it was just. Welcome, Ray. Where are we? Are we still? We're still working here. We're talking on the lot coverage and the letters. What time is our liaison? 7:30. So we're almost there. We've got 6 minutes, people. What are we going to do with our 6 minutes?
Should we approve the minutes? I think that might be a doable thing in 6 minutes.
Okay. We also have subcommittee status. I had requested Natalie to send out a list and people respond to what some subcommittees were on, because somehow that knowledge of what subcommittees are supposed to be functioning has just kind of evaporated. It got recycled or something. Because she came up with a couple, and then I came up with a couple more. Did you print out the list of subcommittees? Maybe?
I did not.
Okay. Well, we created a new one tonight.
I'm on that.
Yep, you are. Congratulations, Michelle. I think you and I should revive the Community Outreach and Education Subcommittee at some point and do something. I know.
It's kind of hard because my plate's a little bit full still.
I know, me too.
So that's why I know I'm not on any other subcommittees,
Okay. Okay.
simply because I knew
Yeah.
how busy I've been.
And you're on, I think Green Building's dead. No, Green Building at this moment is going to try and do some community outreach, because we've decided basically to go along with what the state has.
Well, no, I mean, we don't have the state law is a state law, and
Yeah.
it's just that what we were proposing wouldn't have even matched what the state law
Yeah.
did. So I think, and Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that we really have to wait and see how that new law settles out in terms of availability of what the costs are for doing any extra steps, because in order to recommend a higher level of of code, we have to be able to determine a return on investment, and without getting any numbers. And PG&E is supposed to get those at some point, but the law is too clean, or the law is too new to be able to make those determinations now. So I think the short of it is we're on hold.
We actually got a letter today.
Yeah.
Did you read that? From Ryder, I think his name was?
Oh, I think I might have missed that. I saw the one from Ken, but...
No, this was an attachment
Oh.
to what Ken sent.
No, I didn't.
And, as I told you, I'm not going to be able to come to the meeting next week, but it was a pretty strong recommendation to us to kind of suspend a Brisbane Green Building Ordinance because the state standards are much higher than anything that we had actually suggested.
So I think I was misunderstood. I was thinking that the green building, yes, exactly what you said, Kima, was that we're not doing anything with the green building ordinance right now because the state, we're going to go with the state laws, right?
Well, that's what's been recommended. The committee hasn't met yet, and that was just a letter that was sent out to the subcommittee.
Okay.
Recommending a course of action for the subcommittee.
I'm sorry.
And they have to vote on it.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's new to me.
Okay.
But yeah, I see that we got that, so I'll take a look at it once my internet works again.
So does that vote involve just you or the whole, or the planning
Involves the
department?
subcommittee.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
You, or does it also involve the planning commission?
Well, the subcommittee consists of 2 members from OSEC, 2 members from the planning commission. Who else? I think, is that all? I think that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys will vote next time or not with you.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
I think the goal was, there was supposed to be a recommendation from this joint subcommittee back to council, and what I'm hearing from staff is that you did all the work you did prior, and then there were meetings last year, and they want to kind of put some closure on it, even if the closure is to tell the council, we've decided to do nothing until 6 months, 1 year from now. So that's what October 15th is for. So I'm wondering if, since Barbara went in Glenn's place last time, if Barbara is available, can vote as a proxy in your absence, or should that meeting be rescheduled?
Would that be all right with you?
Sure.
If the vote comes up, I don't even know that it will.
No, I think that's the goal of the meeting.
The purpose of the next meeting is to make a recommendation to the council.
Okay.
And it may well be to accept the recommendations of Mr. Ryder.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, that sort of puts that subcommittee in hand. We didn't get to the minutes. Do we have any other subcommittees that are in force right now?
Sustainability subcommittee, we've got...
Who's on the sustainability subcommittee?
I'm the OSEC liaison to the sustainability committee.
Okay.
And we've got an energy strategy committee, which, is you and me.
Okay.
And what else do we have?
Did you have a subcommittee for the science fair?
Not yet.
Okay.
We will need one eventually.
Okay.
All right.
Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh, do I get one?
Sure. How many people want oranginas?
I'm parched. I don't think I brought any water. Anyway.
I was going to suggest just a minute to reorganize and see who wants to be on view and camera, and whether the council liaisons want to sit in the audience. So maybe a 2-minute break.
Sure.
I can bring some water up too. Seriously, I can at least.
Yeah.
Get her an orangina.
All right, we are now back in session for this, the Wednesday, October 8th meeting of the Open Space and Ecology Subcommittee, or Committee, and we have our council liaisons here. Welcome.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
All right, so I guess I would like to defer to our liaisons about how they would like to proceed. Would you like to start talking at us, or would you like us to start talking at you?
Well, I think the first we want to express our appreciation for your invitation. And as you know, both of us are veterans of this committee, so we're very familiar and very comfortable in this environment, so we're happy about that. And of course, the purpose of the liaison committees is to increase communication between the committees and the council. And my colleague and I have, we met beforehand, and we decided that in response to your question that it would be appropriate for us to listen to what you have to say first, and then we will respond as it seems relevant and appropriate after we've heard from you. Right?
Thank you.
Yep.
So, fellow committee members, would you like to start with the questions that we have here? Why don't we I'll just call out the questions or the number of the question, and if anybody feels like they want to address that particular question to the liaisons, just speak up.
Why don't you read the question so that the home audience can...
Oh, what a lovely idea. Our first question is how to address the pavement of backyards, well, I think really of yards in general in Brisbane. Suggested from Ken Johnson to bring to the council and then bring to the Planning Commission for review. Number 2, can OSEC address land use issues with respect to the Energy Action Plan? And this came about, I think, from our conversation about solar panels on the Baylands. Because that would be a land use decision, but it's also an ecological decision. Number 3, will OSEC be looking at the general plan and submitting comments? Number 4, will OSEC review the Recology EIR? Number 5, can OSEC have input on the survey that will be going out about the Baylands? Number 6, can the Levinson property be acquired and preserved as a PCA? The current, that's Priority Conservation Area. The current biological assessments are old on this property, and can those be updated to determine current state of the species and the land habitat?
Potential.
Potential. Number 7, bring interior courtyard lot coverage in the acres issues to the liaisons to discuss moving further with the issue and how to proceed.
So there's a couple of ones on the list that are hot buttons for me. I don't know if anybody else wants to go first or go down the list. Go ahead. The one about number 6, the Levinson property, I'd really like the council to support making sure that the Levinson property and the Peking Handicraft property are in the priority conservation area designation that Mountain Watch is working on. And I'd also love to have council support in a desire to acquire that property for both habitat and possibly the future for a learning center. I feel that I feel, and the committee agreed with that in our last meeting, that it is an area of high value, not only high potential rehabilitation value, habitat value, and important as a flyway for the Clippy, which is basically already, they're cut off right now from Clippy Hill, but that it's sort of a linchpin and a connector for the whole mountain habitat to public transportation, to access to the mountain from this side. And I think it's a really important key piece to kind of preserving the overall habitat, preserving the value of Clippy Hill, connecting everything together, and making it accessible to public transportation, where right now much of the mountain is not accessible easily to public transportation. And in our last meeting, all the members agreed to a motion that was made to let the council know that OSEC is interested in acquiring and preserving the Levinson property. So I just wanted to put that part out there. And then number 7, of course, is also an important issue that I think directly affects not just open space and views, but
Michelle?
maintaining a living habitat.
I appreciate that. I'd really like to go number by number so that
You didn't say that at the beginning.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry, I thought I did, but maybe I did not correctly articulate. That happens. Does anybody else have additional points they would like to communicate regarding item number 6? Or did Michelle I think she did a very good job speaking for us all. Is everybody?
Well, just the one thing was about making the acquisition on Levinson property. It should be noted that if it becomes available. I mean, it's not available, so it's not really within our grasp at this time, so it's not really an issue until it becomes available.
I had one question for our liaisons. Did council get our motion?
We have your
Sorry.
list.
Your list of questions?
No, last time we passed
Motion?
a motion.
I don't think so.
Okay.
What-
So,
But
What motion? I'm
we're
not sure.
aware of your interest.
yes. we passed a motion to let
the council know.
that we are interested in this as a priority conservation area and as an acquisition
Potential.
potential. And I just wanted to follow up and see if that got to you or not. Yet.
Not
Not-
yet.
Not yet.
I mean, he might be aware personally, but the council has not been.
Not
informed.
officially,
Not officially.
yeah.
Okay, not officially. All right. So, okay, if everybody has had their 2 cents, would you care to address this particular issue?
Go ahead on
Go ahead,
Levinson.
sure.
Okay. The first comment that I would like to make is in reference to the full role that your committee can play regarding the Levinson property, and that has to do really with the open space plan. We have an existing open space plan which was developed by this committee, approved by the council, and a part of the Levinson property, the upper part, the hill part, is included in the open space plan. The lower part is not, and it has a different identification and different, it has PD zoning, I think.
Has what zoning?
PD.
Priority development?
Yeah.
Or-
So my first comment is that if you want to include more than that which is already identified in the open space plan, it probably makes sense if that's how you want to go, and you might want to find out what the total council feels about that, but you might want to reevaluate whether the part of the Levinson property which is already in the open space plan is sufficient. And if you feel it's not, then you probably should do some, further studies or try to see if we could do some further studies, because you're right, it hasn't been studied for some time. And then try to determine whether this is an appropriate addition to the open space plan. And I think that would be kind of the procedural avenue. You might want to find out from the council first, whether they are, comfortable with that, and see where various council members are at. I think that the only conversation that I can recall recently at the council level, and this was a couple of years ago when they were looking at the housing element, And I believe there was a consideration of the Levinson property to the lower part for housing, and the council at that time decided not to include it. So that gives some suggestion of where that particular council was, but you've got, 3 new members now. So you're not really quite sure where people are at. Since I was a part of the committee that put together the current open space plan, I was comfortable with the way in which it is currently designed based on what we knew at that time. The only other thing I'd want to point out is once we do designate open space, then the next step is to say, okay, what is the most critical open space? That is, what is the most important for acquisition? And acquisition means purchase, and that means money. And so then there's not a bottomless pit, so you have to set priorities. And from my personal point of view, and I said that in my memo, at this point, the most important priority is the acquisition of the properties, the parcels on the Southeast Ridge, which is within the open space plan, which is designated as critical because they're critical habitat, some of the best habitat that's still in private property. And so it again becomes a question of priorities when you start talking about acquisition plans with a limited amount of funding. And that, needs to, you can't just talk about one property, you have to talk about, okay, we got multiple possibilities, what are the priorities? What comes first, second, third, and with a limited amount of funding? So there has to be some conversation, and of course that's going to be dependent upon, okay, what is considered most valuable and most critical to the criteria that are used for the most important open space. So that, to me, is the process that needs to be followed in order to approach this issue.
May I ask a question?
You wanted to add to that before
No, that seems to make sense to me.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Do we approach the council through the liaison as a body or individually, like on the street?
My sense is that you're already working in that direction with the motion. I think it would be good to bring it to the council and get it on the council's agenda, and then have a public discussion. But at that public discussion, you're going to hear me say pretty much what I just said now. I don't know what other people are going to say, but that's what I would say.
Yeah.
And to add to that, I think, it's great that you passed a motion, but what would be even better is if you could put in writing in a letter, what your recommendations would be. Not just in, that's kind of a general practice that I think is a good idea. What policies you would recommend. Having it in writing before the council is probably better than a motion, because you can put your reasoning out there, and it's in the public record again.
Okay. So I have a couple questions. I'm hoping Michelle can answer. I know San Bruno Mountain Watch is moving forward with the priority conservation area. Are they also moving forward with a study, I assume?
No.
No. Okay.
We are not funded to do that, and we are very underfunded right now.
Okay.
So we are strictly working on getting a consensus around the mountain for what will be designated as the priority conservation areas.
Okay. And a study's not necessarily part of that. It
No.
sounds like it would be a positive part of that, but it's not a required portion of that.
That's correct.
Okay.
Now, is this in connection at all with the designation that we recently passed a resolution on at the council level about San Bruno Mountain being designated as a priority conservation area? So how does that relate to the Levinson property?
That's part of San Bruno Mountain.
Okay, so it's not a separate PCA, it's...
No, but eventually when we file the PCA status, I believe, I'm not the person who's the point person for Mountain Watch on that, but when we file a priority conservation area plan, I believe we have to include maps of what we consider to be the priority conservation areas. Mind you, just because a property is designated as a PCA doesn't mean that it won't get developed. It's no protection. All it does is open the door for being able to get grants, and it takes it a little bit out of the limelight for priority development areas. It states a consciousness of what would be our intent wish-wise. It's not an obligation to purchase it. It's not an obligation to protect it. It is merely saying we consider this to be an area that should be conserved rather than developed as high-density development or anything else. So I just want to make that really clear. And without the PCA status, the likelihood of any entity being able to get grant money to purchase it for a learning center for San Bruno Mountain and as a gateway to the mountain would be pretty much nil without the PCA status. And that's why I feel that extending the PCA status for that whole entire property all the way down to Bay Shore is critically important to potential future plans, not necessarily designating it as open space, but conserved space. And there's a difference there. I mean, I could really see that area being worked as a wetlands, a learning center, a small demonstration farm, and the gateway to San Bruno Mountain, as well as the conservation of the flyway for the Calippi on the upper part of the property. It is really a critical piece of property connecting this most valuable resource we have to the rest of the world.
I have one more question for you, Michelle, and if you do not, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, and if you do not feel it's appropriate, you're welcome not to answer it.
Okay.
But I was just thinking about Ray's statement about not having an endless pot of money and having to set priorities. And so with a mind to that and trying to move this process forward as quickly and expeditiously as possible, I'm going to go ahead and ask you if you have any personal sense about how San Bruno Mountain Watch might prioritize the Southeast Ridge and the Levinson property.
Well, it's really a Sophie's Choice kind of question.
I know. I know.
And I know exactly how they'd prioritize it. They'd say we're saving both of it because, it's a whole working habitat that we're going towards, not chopping it up into little pieces.
Okay.
And it's all integrated and integral. And once people begin to understand that and stop parceling it off and chopping it up, then maybe we have a hope of maintaining biodiversity and a full living habitat. And that's our goal, not just pretty open space.
So to clarify about the breadth of the PCA, so what came before the council before when we approved of that resolution, did that include the Levinson property? Because you mentioned, Michelle, extending it to the Levinson property.
I don't believe it did. I looked at it, and there's no maps attached to that document that we got.
No, I think there was a description of certain areas, and I don't recall that being.
Yeah, I don't believe it has maps attached. I'm not sure, actually, Lori.
Okay.
I know that when we go to file the actual PCA status, I think it needs to include maps, but I'm not even positive about that because I have not been the point person on this.
Okay, and I just wanted to comment on one point that you made earlier. You said that it opens, a PCA designation would open the possibility of getting funding for conservation. I did note, however, that the PCA designation that we considered recently included the Baylands, and that has already been designated as a priority development area, a PDA. So, and I asked our city staff, well, how can you have both? It has to be one or the other, and they said no. It just means you have grant opportunities, to go for either. So I just wanted to let you know that as well.
Yeah, no, I knew that, but if you have an area that is only designated as a PCA and not a PDA, then, they don't look at it as, oh, look, it's a PDA. People who want to develop, look where the PDAs are. People who want to conserve, look where the PCAs are. So having it as a PCA sort of takes it a little off the table for being a priority development area. And I think that that's important because as a step in conservation of that area, we're doing what we need to do with it as a community and as the stewards of the habitat, and which is to make it an important gateway to the mountain and for all of the public, not just Brisbane.
So we've talked about the Levinson property as our wish to acquire it and preserve it as a PCA, or work towards preservation as a PCA. I don't think we have a subcommittee working on that right now. But
Well, we did assign Glenn and I to write the letter.
Okay.
So, I consider us the PCA subcommittee at this point.
Okay. So you guys will work towards that. We also wanted to ask about the biological assessments. Now, we've decided those are not absolutely necessary, but they'd probably be useful. Again, we're running into that pot of money issue.
If we had PCA status, then we could apply for a grant to get a biological assessment.
So maybe
So it all has to fall into,
maybe that's an egg chicken problem then.
probably.
Okay. Is there anything else that we would like to discuss concerning the Levinson property with our liaisons? Is there anything else they'd like to share with us? All right. Does somebody, I've got my my magic hat here, somebody pull out the next.
Are you going to do them in order?
Well, you started off with number 6, so I think the answer to that is no.
Sorry, I mean, you didn't specify at the beginning.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I
You can go to one now.
have no need to have control of that particular aspect of this meeting. So, anybody just jump in with whatever moves them, if you please.
Let's do them in order.
Okay. Backyard pavements, and this says backyard, but it's really yard pavement in Brisbane. It's come up to the committee that there are a couple properties that are just wall-to-wall pavement, and we felt that was contrary to our goals of keeping this as a green city. And, just looking at some of the parts of San Francisco where it is wall-to-wall pavement. And this, again, gets into one of those issues that's half Planning Commission, half OSEC. And so I think because of its difficult nature, we particularly wanted some direction from council and our liaison committee on this matter.
Can staff interject quickly first?
Please.
We had talked at the last meeting, and we talked about the first step being sort of an education and putting an article in the city newspaper and on the website about what the impacts were to paving your property or concreting over your property, and what the grading permit requires, and how altering your drainage and making your pervious surface impervious affects your downhill property, and that you have liability. So I thought the understanding was we would take that step first. Certainly we can talk about if there are further steps that should happen in the future, but
Yeah.
we also talked a little bit about not regulating the exception, and we hadn't gotten back to the number of grading permits. I don't think I'd reported back, but I believe we had 4 that were related to new homes. We had 1 in the commercial area in town, and we had 1 in the residential area in town that was like a terracing of a backyard. So in 1 year, we haven't had
Yeah.
anyone paving that lot, but that doesn't.
So, I'm sorry to be sidetracked here, but that place on San Bruno Avenue, do they not have a permit for concreting their entire yard?
I can't speak to that
See,
one.
so, I mean, if we're going to make
Right.
an issue of it being an exception, I don't know how much of an exception it is, because, anyway, I don't want to go there. I think, yes, we can do that, Karen, but I still think when we have our liaisons here, I'd still like to address this question to them, so.
You want to respond?
Sure. Well, we talked about this at our pre-meeting when we went over the list of questions. And, if there's any particular instances, what staff had recommended is that it goes through code enforcement. And that, you know, you can certainly send a letter to the council saying that this is a concern of yours. But ultimately, it would have to go to the planning commission and for adoption of an ordinance of some sort regulating this. It's not something that can be
Yeah.
regulated on a case-by-case basis at the committee level.
Absolutely. Gosh, I had a thought. I think, please chime in if I'm remembering this incorrectly. I think when we talked to staff, we found that there's nothing in the code that prevents people from paving their entire yards. So we could not currently approach this as an enforcement issue because there's nothing to enforce.
Right.
There's nothing to say, no, you can't do that. So it sounds like moving forward, what do we need to do?
Education.
Education, number one. Number two, maybe draft a letter to the city council and at large and see if they feel that this is something that needs to be addressed with the planning commission.
I actually would like to address a letter to the city council and ask them to address it.
Okay.
I don't really think voluntary action is going to be enough on this.
I also, sadly enough, as much as I love humanity, I'm also concerned that education and is not going to be adequate, and that I would feel personally more comfortable if the city had something in place, some sort of maximum or minimum.
Yeah.
Hema?
I would agree with you. I don't think that people who are inclined to pour concrete over their whole lot aren't going to be dissuaded by touchy-feely reminders of why they shouldn't do it.
Yeah. But we should do both. We're not.
But then many of the people who are going to concrete their backyard aren't going to go ask the city for a permit either.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's right. So.
We're kind of stuck there. All right. Glenn, I would like to volunteer to be on a subcommittee with you to draft this letter.
All right.
Can we do that? Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Does anybody have any closing comments for the paving of the yards in Brisbane?
When we look at that, we need to look at not just the yards, but the whole plan, including, commercial and development, I think, as well.
All right. Number two. Would anybody like to take this one?
I'm still a little bit vague on the context of this question, but I would like to ask the council liaisons just for a little bit of guidance on energy action plan. I mean, how are you envisioning this? Are you looking now for a climate action plan like a lot of cities have, or could you just talk to us a little bit about it?
Okay. First of all, we'd like you very much to do it. You may recall, some of you, that a few years ago the council requested that this committee, create an energy action plan, which was kind of our version of a climate action plan. At that time, it was just seemed like it was an appropriate, relevant thing for a green city like Brisbane to do. And now it's getting to the point where something of this nature needs to be in place if we're going to get grant funding for a lot of projects like energy efficiency and so forth. And we were way up in front of everybody on the green building ordinance that you were talking about earlier, but on the energy action plan or / climate action plan or sustainability plan, it doesn't really make any difference what you call it as long as you have the appropriate content. And, we're getting behind. And a lot of cities in San Mateo County have such plans. And funding agencies have begun to make it clear that, if you have such a plan in place and it's credible, you're going to get funding for the various kinds of things that are in the plan to do. So I guess from the council's point of view, we'd really like you to encourage you to get working on that because we need to have that in place.
Can we get some samples? Can staff get us some samples of some of the plans that are already implemented in other parts of San Mateo County, or best practice plans in the state of California, as well as an exact plan of how we go about implementing a climate action plan? Do we write it, submit it to the council? Does it go through the planning commission? What are all the steps we need to take? Like, bam, 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 bam. We need a roadmap to get it done. Not this back and forth nebulous thing, but we need a solid roadmap of what it's to include, what the council wants it to include, how you want it written, how we submit it, and lay out a timeline for us. Because if you want it done, that's what we need to get it done. We need a roadmap of exactly the steps we need to take to get it done and who needs to sign off on it. Otherwise, it'll end up with we want the city to fund everybody to buy a solar panel, or whatever. I mean, I don't mean to sound facetious, but we need a clear-cut set of guidelines and how you want us to do it.
Yeah, when I was actually, I was at the League of California Cities conference in LA a month or so ago. I was on a panel where Palo Alto was featured for their climate action plan, and they won a Beacon Award for it. So that's one example in the region, not San Mateo County, and I'm sure there are others even within our county. And we have a lot of these practices. We just haven't put them on paper.
Okay.
So I don't think I agree with you. We need to look at how to do it, what other cities have done it. We don't need to start from scratch. It's been done before. And we
Yep,
just need
imitation's the highest form of flattery. Get us a copy of their plan.
Yeah, I imagine that any city that has one is probably going to have it posted on their website too, so it shouldn't be too hard to find.
Maybe we can have that on our agenda and get it in our next packet.
Glenn?
Speak.
I've said this before. I have absolutely no objection to a climate action plan or an energy action plan, but you and I, Ray, were on a committee that went through quite a lot of planning before, and it ended up being pretty aspirational in a lot of ways. And I'm been frustrated by the idea that there seem to be many things that we can't actually require. We can talk about wanting homeowners in Brisbane to install solar panels or to retrofit their houses, but as far as actually getting them to do that, it's not clear to me that the city has the mechanisms to require people to do that. So I guess that's my frustration about this, is that, we can write a list, and we can do a good list of things that we would like to do. But the question in my mind is that how do we actually get those things done? I mean, does that help clarify my concerns about it?
Sure. I'm sure you recall that when this whole issue first came up, we did have a number of documents to begin with, and the county actually had produced an energy water conservation plan, and the county representative, Kim Springer, came before this committee, and that served as a model for that time, and then a number of other communities had produced, climate action plans. And we looked at the various things and we came pretty much to the same conclusion that you've just expressed, Glenn, that a lot of the stuff that's particularly in the climate action plans was, not only aspirational, it was implausible. I mean, they would just put in, we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by, 50% by such and so, but there was no real way of achieving that. It was just a sort of a pie in the sky kind of thing, and which is the reason we decided not to do a climate action plan. That's why it's considered an energy action plan. And in fact, if you go back and look at the stuff that we were working with at that time, we had a whole list of energy efficient kind of things that the city can do. We can build into our practices with building. Many of the things we actually already do anyway, because we've been trying to do our best in many realms, and that just needs to be codified and written. We're already doing it. So I think that there are questions of what can we actually achieve, and from the council's point of view, I think what we're looking for is something that really is in the realm of achievability. And if there are various kinds of additional enforcement things we need to do, that would be great, because I think we're in the mood to do what we can. You know, that's feasible within the realm of legal possibility. But there is a growing awareness that, you know, these are really significant public issues that councils now all over the state, with the assistance of state law, are really implementing. And so I think now is the time for us to get on board and do our thing.
Ray, is there stuff from the work that the committee has done in the past that we can resurrect? And do you know approximately where that would be, or the time frame for that, so that we can search that out rather than starting from fresh?
Yeah, you don't have to start from scratch, because, I mean, the committee, the original committee was Glenn and Anjan and myself.
And is that documented anywhere in the city archives that we
We had
could
a number of
access it?
materials that were collected. We had the county, we had a number of cities. I remember we had Burlingame, so we didn't have Palo Altos yet, but we did have Burlingame and a few others. So we had a lot of stuff collected, and we were going through determining, you know, what made sense for Brisbane.
Uh-huh.
And the council very explicitly said, what we really want are things that we can actually do, not just a lot
Right.
of, you know, reduce greenhouse gas emissions by such and such %. I think one of the things that really turned us off was that there was a CCAG grant which enabled a firm to come around and make a guesstimate of the greenhouse gas emissions from every city in the county. And the one that was done for Brisbane, you know, noted that something like 75 or 80% of the greenhouse gas emissions from Brisbane were from the traffic on 101. And so we thought, yeah, no, that's very interesting, but if somebody sets up some kind of matrix of performance and uses that information, what in the world are we going to be able to do about the traffic
Right.
on 101? You know, I mean, it was just kind of crazy. It was irrelevant. And so that's why the council didn't want to, you know, get caught up in that. We wanted, okay, what kind of energy efficiency things can we do? And of course, a lot of that now is that we were talking about is actually in the state building code, and some of it is in, you know, good practices that more and more we're following, and recycling. I mean, there are a lot of things we're doing that, you know, the energy upgrade program that Glenn knows a lot about. I mean, there are many things that we can really put in there.
So one follow-up question, if that's okay. It seems to me that a lot of the emissions from the city of Brisbane, I mean, after we get rid of the 101 emissions, which are the big category, probably a lot of the energy use is, and emissions are from our industrial sector, both the industrial park and on the marina. So is it possible to require commercial facilities to get an energy audit, for example? I mean, would the council be willing to consider some sort of ordinance of that sort? Just for example.
Well, my personal answer is that it makes sense if it's legally possible. And that's why you always have to have a city attorney. You say, okay, can we do this? And is it feasible? And from a legal point of view, it strikes me as something that, you know, we ought to be able to do. But I'd have to defer to, I mean, make that recommendation. I would respond positively, but we'll have to find out whether, you know, the law is in any way in the way of doing that.
So Karen and Natalie, are you able to find the archival material that Ray's talking about for us?
Any past material from the Energy Subcommittee was the Mitch Bull notes.
That was the sum total of it? Because I know we tried to get things before, and that was, okay. So I guess that brings me to one point I wanted to make is
But
that...
I just meant, before you go, I'm the world's #1 pack rat.
Cool. I'm number 2.
And I've got boxes full of the old stuff that our committee worked on, and I probably have a lot of it in file boxes at home, much to the dismay of my spouse. But I'm sure I have it somewhere.
All right. Thank you, Ray.
But before we get off to the next topic, Natalie, can you look into that? The Councilmember Lori mentioned that Palo Alto has an award-winning
Right.
action plan. I mean, if we just take that and we adopt that as a framework and then go through what's in it, it shouldn't take that long to knock out.
Well, keep in mind that Palo Alto has its own utility and gives incentives to businesses to put solar, and you know it's just a totally different
still a
system.
framework.
I mean,
It's
it's
a
great,
outline.
but we don't have anything like that. And one of the things I'd love to see in a climate action plan, you know, might be ways to encourage businesses to put solar on their roofs and to get grants for, you know, EV charging stations, to have residential bulk solar purchasing programs. You know, there's things being done in other cities that I see and that I learned about that are so exciting, and I think that would be a good place to put that information. But Palo Alto, you know, might be a good example, but not the right fit for our city. So, you know, we should look at it, but also other smaller cities that don't have their own utilities.
Lori, be sure and send us any ideas that you have that you'd like us to try and incorporate, since you've been out and about learning about it, and we will.
I would like to add.
Could I just add,
Sure.
even though we could go back and look at the old files, there's been so much stuff come out recently. Just in the last couple of years, this has been, it's really become a fad. Mm-hmm. And so as a consequence, everybody is into producing this kind of thing. So there's lots of material. And with your staff, we attended a meeting in Sacramento called the Adaptation Conference, and put on by the local government council. And they have their own sets of materials, best practices. I mean, there's just loads of material. And so I'm sure that the staff will have no trouble whatsoever, pulling together models, examples, things from small cities. There was a talk from the mayor, was it Lancaster? Yes. Who was bragging about how they're going to be the first city to be, zero carbon in California. And this is a city in the middle of the desert, So, I mean, a lot of things are happening, and they're just passing us by, and I don't know whether we want to achieve that. But what was interesting about Lancaster, talking about what you can require and impose, they got away with a lot of regulations that I didn't even realize you could do. So, it's worth looking into all these things and then deciding what makes sense for Brisbane.
Yeah. So I joined this committee 3.5 years. Was it really 3.5 years ago, Michelle?
2.5 years.
2.5 years ago, Michelle. In part with the ambition of working on the Energy Action Plan. Somehow this thing called the DEIR happened and really upset a lot of our plans. I think another issue we've been facing is general lack of tenure on this committee. We just had a lot of changeover. And I really hope that we're all going to pull together and get our feet underneath us. I just wanted to express that to my fellow committee. We need to get these subcommittees working, and if, I know we're all hurting right now in our personal lives for one reason or another, but I hope we can put in a little more time with our subcommittees. Ray, if you find the old stuff, and Natalie, you find the new stuff, I think in a week or two, Glenn and I will be buried in paper.
We've met as a subcommittee, and we talked about the RICAPS model. The CCAG has put together a framework and a template, and in San Mateo County, well, they have a working group that meets monthly for staff to work on plans, work out questions with other agencies, to document and quantify what improvements are being made. And apparently all agencies in the county except for 2 have at least started a plan, and maybe only 6 of those haven't yet completed their plan. But there's a working group formed to the CCAG is trying to channel each agency to get their plan going now. I think a couple of years ago, they were pushing for climate action plans, and all of the greenhouse gas emissions need to be dealt with, but they reevaluated that, and we can basically do any plan we want. They're
Right.
just giving us a template.
Right.
And they also have consultant support, so staff has already talked about bringing them next month to kick off and get this thing going.
So is that meeting just for staff, or is it also for committee members?
I've only seen staff there, but
Okay.
we can check.
All right, might
But,
be interesting.
We're kind of talking about the model because we have, or how we're going to proceed, because we have the two of you on a subcommittee, that the subcommittee then will work into the detail and then report back to the committee, because we obviously need the full committee support of the plan that we're doing. But I agree with Ray, there's information everywhere out there, so
Yeah.
getting our plan on paper should just be a matter of, doing the work.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested in Lancaster because as a small entity, we often have problems with laws and enforcements. And if Lancaster really was able to push the envelope on, because I know that's been some of Glenn's frustration, is that we do stuff and then have no way to, and then the lawyer says, "Oh no, you don't." That's of particular interest to me, I think. So
Lancaster's not that small.
it's not.
No, not that small. No.
Oh damn.
They're just out there and isolated.
But they are out in the middle of the desert.
I guess that was wishful thinking. All right.
Number 3?
Number 3, all agree?
Will we be looking at the general plan,
Want me to answer?
draft of the general plan?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Number 4?
Just a little quick history. As you know, the current general plan was approved by the voters in a referendum in 1994. And then there was an effort made to update the general plan in about 2005, and it was to be associated with the work on the Baylands that was then ongoing, and they were going to use the same EIR for justification. And during that time, in the mid-2000s, about 10 years ago, there was a full process of updating the general plan. And that process involved every relevant committee and commission, made suggestions, and this committee, and I was a part of that, we were particularly charged with the open space element, incorporating the new open space plan, and the conservation element, and also there are parts of the economic development section that deal with sustainability. And so we had special responsibility for that, and we made submissions, just like planning made submissions for a broader array of things, and all of that went to the council, and the council reviewed all of it, and then they had a whole set of revisions that were kind of, sort of on the front burner, and then the whole process sort of turned out to be not as likely to happen, with the whole question of the EIR just not happening, because the developer decided we're going to change the plan, and that means waiting for the plan before you get the whole EIR going, and so the whole thing was kind of put on the back burner from the front burner. So all that work is there, and all the committees and commissions participated in that, and this committee did, I think, in a way, probably more work than any other committee, because we had to incorporate a whole new thing that wasn't in the 1994 plan. That is the open space plan, which was, passed in 2000. So that was way after 1994. So this committee did a lot of work, and that's all available. You talk about records and so forth. That should be easily accessible. And so what we need to do is, to continue to update it, and then the question will become, so does the EIR that we're doing for the Baylands, how much of what that covers is adequate to justify the the full general plan, and that will of course have to be determined. But that's the strategy, and we've got to do a new general plan. So it's coming, and will you be involved? Absolutely.
Okay.
Ray, I have a question. When the new general plan comes out, is that also going to be voted on? Is that is that normal that you said the first one was voted on?
Is it normal for general plans to be voted on? No, it's usually an action of the city council in most cases.
Right.
In our case, we had a referendum, so the voters did have to weigh in on it because the referendum was filed. The one aspect of the general plan and associated matters that will be coming to the voters eventually is the whole Baylands issue.
Right.
And that will come to the voters. And that will involve, as you know from reading the draft EIR, that there are a number of potential changes to the general plan that will have to be made in order to make certain things, possible in a plan. And that may or may not come out of the process, but there is a commitment on the part of the council to bring that to the voters.
Okay, thanks.
And just to add on what we had talked about at our meeting, when you look at the general plan, you'll be looking at, of course, the conservation elements and the open space elements. So you may not look at everything, but there's those in particular that would be appropriate given your role.
Yeah, and if I could add, in the 1994 general plan, there is a section of commitment to sustainable development, and the only definition there is the one from the World Commission, which is a relatively short definition. We can add a lot more to that now. You have the sustainability goals that the council has already approved, and I know that this committee has been thinking a lot about, so what's sustainability, and a lot of that should now be incorporated, I think, in the general plan. So you really are the place where that starts.
Great.
So that brings to mind, Glenn, I think you're the only surviving member of the Sustainability Committee.
I've always been just the OSEC liaison to the Sustainability Committee.
Okay, I thought we had a Sustainability Subcommittee definition when we were doing the DEIR and the brochure.
I don't think so.
Okay, I may be misremembering that. So, okay.
I think you did have because one of the things that I had requested one of the last times I was here was that you work on the educating the public as to what sustainability is. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? Some of you, I think, just about all, with the exception. Yeah. Where here, when I made that suggestion, because we have a lot of education on what sustainability is, and I think there was a conversation about a subcommittee, and I remember Eleanor Court volunteered for it.
Yeah,
remember that? Yeah.
Was my memory was that Eleanor
and that,
was on that.
it somehow didn't happen, but
Well, you and Michelle are on the education subcommittee, aren't you?
Yeah,
So,
we are.
so isn't that within your ambit?
It wasn't on it was, where we got hung up was the definition of sustainability.
Yeah, and
we started
somebody
spinning
else
on
was
that.
gonna work
okay,
on that.
all right.
I think it was,
There are about 500 million definitions.
Maybe that's
so
why.
you got to sort of
Yeah.
decide, okay, what do we want
Yeah.
to go with? That's true.
yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's what happened. Mary and Elena left. Well, I think since that was what had us spinning last time, maybe we should tackle that. Do we feel that that would be best tackled at committee level or subcommittee level? I'd like to hear from the committee briefly.
Are you talking the general plan or the
No,
definition
the definition of
sustainability?
sustainability that we're going to use as our working definition.
I haven't spent much time thinking about it because it's such a,
It's kind of a tar baby.
that's a good word for it. Glenn, you've probably done the most deep thinking on the definition of sustainability. I'm sure you stay awake at nights dreaming about it.
Well, I don't know. Do we want to define it specifically, or do we want to educate the public about the fact that there are limits to ecosystems, that that everything on Earth is limited, that we don't know where those limits are, that it's important to stay within those limits? I mean, I think that's the sort of education that might be more valuable to the public than a definition of sustainability.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think, so what's the point of caring about sustainability, really?
Right.
Is the issue. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, well, maybe this is a matter for the community outreach and education.
Yeah, let's
Committee then.
let's hammer that out at our next meeting.
Okay,
And we have that on our agenda for the next meeting
okay.
to determine how we're going to define sustainability versus how we're going to educate the public on that which has not yet completely been defined. In some ways, it's defined after we've crossed the limit of sustainability.
Yeah.
Then we know the definition of what wasn't and what was.
Yeah.
You know what I mean. Sorry.
Sure.
On to the next thing.
Thank you, Michelle, for those uplifting words.
Well, you know, once you pass a sustainability limit and there's no going back on it, you certainly know where the line in the sand was, only now it's too damn late to do anything about
Right.
it.
Yeah,
And that's what we're doing every single day.
Right.
yeah.
Which is the whole point of the precautionary principle.
Right. But people just won't believe it until
Yeah.
they experience the catastrophic events of crossing sustainability barriers.
Well, we did try to do some education with the getting people to calculate their carbon footprint and raise awareness about this issue. I wish we could have reached more people, but
I just want to point out at the community park fest day in the park, I did like the idea you had of the carbon footprint piñata. I thought that was really clever.
And you should thank Natalie for excellent execution on that, Natalie.
Well done.
we're going to mostly talk about that next time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, please, Glenn.
One of the major mandates of this committee is education about sustainability and other things. And we have fairly limited reach and fairly limited opportunities to reach the public. You know, we have the day in the park, we can publish brochures and things like that. I'm wondering if council might consider at its regular meetings, because people do watch those, as I understand it, a 10-minute presentation per meeting on some environmental topic, maybe with slides or something like that. This has been bugging me for a while. We just don't, there's a lot of education we could do, but opportunities to get it out there are kind of limited. And, I've also thought about, things like posters or banners, going down Visitation Avenue, something like that, but that takes money. And so maybe this is not the appropriate time or place to talk about that, but it's something I would like to talk to the council about, to see whether there's anything that they could consider doing to help us expand our reach.
It's really hard when the council meetings routinely go to the next day, like 12:30 p.m. I mean, I went to the last council meeting and I left at 11:30, and they went on for another hour.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to look at them in the eye and say, can we add a 10-minute presentation to your agenda, which might elicit discussion, making it a half an hour and then it's an hour. That's pretty hard because they've got some really critical issues in front of them that need to be discussed as well. But if you have any ideas, or maybe a quarterly report.
I don't know.
Well, it seems to me that, the people who tune in and come to the meetings, the council meetings, are probably pretty well informed about sustainability. I might be wrong, but, what you really want to do is reach the people who aren't at the meetings.
Exactly.
And, putting something in the city news, something that reaches every resident, might be a better bet than making a presentation at a council meeting.
Okay, since we're going down this road anyway, which is good, it's good. One of my pet projects that I've been wanting to do in terms of community outreach and education is see if OSEC can get a section or small shelf at the library and stock it with books and movies that people could come in and say, I want a movie tonight. What can I get in the way of an environmental documentary?
We could also do environmental documentaries, show them on the Community Access Channel. Yeah. And we had talked about that before we got derailed with the draft EIR.
Yeah.
So we should put together an education plan as not just the committee, but a viable one for the whole committee to participate in. So maybe we should put that on our agenda as well. of education plan.
I think, should we meet as a subcommittee first, though?
No,
Okay.
I think we should brainstorm it as the whole group, and then the subcommittee would work on the details and tactics once we have our strategies in place.
I was just going to comment that maybe you should start with the subcommittee because you've given a long list of things already for an agenda that
Yeah.
isn't getting
December,
very.
I mean, if education is one of our biggest things that we're supposed to do,
Yeah.
it wouldn't hurt to spend 10 minutes brainstorming it as the whole group. More heads together is better. And then the subcommittee can take and go and vet each of those ideas and come back with a tactical plan.
I don't
Sounds
care
good.
as long as it gets done.
So
Whatever makes everybody
squeeze
happy.
it in there, maybe not for next month, but the month after then,
Yeah.
because we do have a lot of stuff
Yeah,
to
yeah,
do.
I mean, I was thinking maybe we have a limit on the number of items on the agenda, and then we'll get more substantially through them if we
Yeah.
only put a certain number on each time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Number 4, everyone.
Will the OSEC review the Recology EIR? If it's anything like the Baylands draft EIR, I hope your answer is no.
Don't let us do it, please.
You want to respond? Go ahead.
So, unfortunately, yes, you probably will have a role. But one suggestion that we talked about is that, you really want to be providing, policy direction rather than looking at it line by line like you did with the Baylands draft EIR. It should be at a higher level, not providing edits, but more, policy direction about what you think was or was not adequately studied.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, will help decrease the burden on you as well and be more effective.
We'll see. Depends how well it's written. Depends how complete it is, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, number 5.
Is everybody satisfied with number 4? Kima, I'd like you to have a chance to weigh in.
Sustainability.
No, the Recology EIR. Do you have anything you want to say about that?
No, I'm gonna pass on that one.
All right,
Thanks.
sure. Sorry to put you on the spot there.
No, that's okay. Sorry for the interruptions.
Stuff happens.
Multitasking tonight.
Yep, and that's okay. Number 5, can OSEC have input on, or would the council like OSEC to have input on the survey that's going to be going out around the Baylands?
Okay. I'm on the council subcommittee dealing with the survey, so I sort of know where that's at. We have a firm that's been hired. They've done a couple of focus groups to sort of with people who are not, fully informed, just to see what people know and don't know. It was more kind of what level of education about all these issues that people have. And what you find out is that there's a lot that people just don't have any knowledge of. And one of the concepts that people don't have a clue about is sustainability. That became pretty clear. And so we've changed personnel so far as the lead person on the construction of the survey. So that sort of delayed things a little. We are still in the process of figuring out how we come out at the end with a professional survey that also goes through a public process.
Yeah. I see that being difficult.
We want to do both, and that is not the easiest thing in the world. We do want to get input as to what kinds of things we think, or you all think, or anybody thinks should be a part of the survey content. And exactly how we do that, we haven't really defined as such. We do know that we don't want to put the survey out into the public until there's a variety of information available. We want to make sure that responses to the comments on the draft DIR are available. We want to make sure there's fiscal studies that are being done. We want to make sure that that's available. You know, it's just going to be feasible for the city in any way from fiscal point of view. And then we're also looking at trying to, quantify the whole sustainability dimension, get some feel for that, so that people can have some numbers by all the different options that are out there, alternative scenarios and so forth. And then we want to get information from people as to what they're comfortable with and what they're willing to support and what they would oppose. And so you can start imagining what all the various possibilities are for questions. And we haven't composed any questions at all yet. We're still in the process of trying to figure out what process we use, and obviously we'll have to use the professional company to finally get to the ultimate language of the questions, but we do want to make sure that all the things that are important are covered, and we want to make sure that the way in which they're covered doesn't have any obvious biases. We want to make it as objectively constructed and formulated as possible. But on the other hand, we want to make sure that people feel that they have some, all the phrase these days is the stakeholders, that that all the stakeholders have felt that they've been at least part of the process and been listened to. And so that's kind of how we're thinking about it. It's probably not going to happen until probably next spring. If you listen to all the things that I mentioned about what needs to come together first, none of that's going to really be available until probably, the end of the year. So, and then we start working on questions. So survey's probably not going to be until at the earliest next spring.
Do you mean spring 2015?
2015, yeah.
Just checking.
Right, yeah, right. So that's kind of the most specific answer I can give at this point. But if you have any insights as to how we balance all these things, we are certainly open.
Committee?
I guess one comment I would have to throw in the mix there is surveys that are really long tend to have a lower response rate.
Right.
And so balancing all of those priorities, and I agree that all of those are important, and finding a way of distilling them down to, the minimum number of questions that can facilitate getting that information is critical. Otherwise, you'll find a lot of the surveys are half finished and,
right.
Things like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very important observation.
The other thing is maybe develop two surveys, the short form and the long form, and let people self-select which survey they want to take.
Yeah, it's one possibility. Another possibility is not just to have one survey, but, maybe two.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't figured all that out yet, because once you start listing all the things you'd like to know from the public, you're right, it gets too long.
Yeah.
And then you say, oh, well, maybe we should sort of figure, let's go after this set at this time, and then the second set at an additional time, and try to figure the strategy out, because what you really want to find out is where the general public, what their thinking is.
Yeah.
I think that brings us to number 7.
I think you're right, Michelle. This is very dear to everybody, I think, on this committee. Who would like to lead off the conversation?
I'm happy to. Having sat through so many of the meetings, we felt as a committee that having the interior courtyard space not count as part of the floor area ratio for a house or any construction, especially in the Brisbane Acres, was contrary to the whole idea of preserving open space in the Brisbane Acres area and having circulation and habitat and all of that. And I kind of object to it in the regular, building code in regular Brisbane as well, but I was informed by city staff during the public hearings about a particular property that most of the cities in the state of California do not count enclosed interior courtyards if they do not have a roof as part of the floor area ratio. But I think that and the committee agreed, and we all felt that way. I wouldn't be bringing it up on the committee. I'd be bringing it up individually, which I intend to do as well. But that it's kind of a contradictory. It's contradictory to the whole idea of the lot coverage part of the building codes for the Brisbane Acres. And an interior courtyard that's completely surrounded by house has no ability for fly-through, habitat, anything, except if a bird shits on it. That's about it, because it's not covered by a roof, or that we know of, because once it's done, there's no way to monitor that anymore without an invasion of privacy. And therefore, we feel that it should not be included in the floor area ratio if it's enclosed on 4 sides.
Yeah. This is one of those ecology planning issue things. And we had staff working on some language that we wanted to put forward, not with a mind to tell council or the planning commission what to do, but with a mind to being helpful.
And specific.
And specific and expeditious.
Yeah.
Has that language come before anyone? No.
No.
No, it hasn't.
But I think we understand the general idea, even
Okay.
without any specific language.
Okay.
And we just didn't want to, Stuart got way into the weeds with us because he wanted to make sure that we did not, how did you feel about a courtyard that's open on one side and surrounded on 3 sides, So like, in other words, a U-shaped building. Did you consider that to be, part of the floor area ratio or not? And that's not, because it doesn't meet the criteria. You could still have animals and flow through and stuff, even though
It's marginal value.
it's a marginal value, but it is different than a space that is entirely enclosed on 4 sides or more than 90% enclosed.
Well, we understand your concern, and I would suggest writing a letter with your policy recommendation to the council. And as I understand it, this issue, will eventually come before the council when we look at, the issues that came out of the Planning Commission appeal.
One of our great concerns is the word eventually, because
And I don't know that timing.
I know, and that's one of the reasons why we
dug into it.
So quickly and so specifically, because time's a wasting. And the longer we wait, the more situations will come up where the ambiguity of this and the contradictory nature of this, once an application is before the city, you can't change the law to affect that application.
Yeah.
And that's been made extremely clear numerous times. And therefore, we would like to get ahead of that curve and prevent that from becoming the kind of issue and the divisiveness that was experienced in the last situation where this came up.
Okay.
Sure.
I have 2 things I'd like to interject. One is that we are going to lose Glenn soon, so if she has any closing words, I would like to give her an opportunity. Okay. My second interjection is that I would like to ask council, what is the most proactive course of action you will tolerate from this committee regarding this issue?
Well put,
Did I
Barbara.
read that?
Yeah, that was pretty loaded.
I'll let Ray take that one.
We'll tolerate anything.
Yeah, but will you act on it? No.
No, actually, I share the same sense of urgency, so I think we're really on the same page there. That's the reason that I wrote that memo that's been distributed to you all, and I made this as a part of the larger set of Brisbane Acres issues.
And I don't know
And
if you got a copy of my email as well, but I identified it in my email as well.
So you got two council members here that essentially agree with the concern and would like to see that, and I would call it a loophole, closed. But I think it's a part of a broader set of issues that have been put before the planning department. And I know they're working on it, but this question of when it's all going to happen. One of the things that I was concerned regarding the planning department, all the stuff that they're being asked to do, is that I felt and other council members felt, and obviously the city manager felt, that they were understaffed. And so we're in the process of hiring a new associate planner. Actually, a person has been very close in the process, and hopefully that'll come to be in the relatively near future. So we'll get a little greater working capacity in the planning department so that they can address all the things that are on their plate, which are very considerable. And this whole set of Brisbane Acres issues is certainly up there at the top because, as you can recall from my memo, I mean, there's a whole question of how do we implement all those policies from the 1994 general plan that are still not in any of our zoning ordinances, and that kind of bugs me. And so you're sort of preaching to the choir, so to speak. I mean, I really agree with that, but on the other hand, I understand that the planning department just hasn't had the capacity to deal with all these things. Just haven't had the personnel. Hopefully, we're in the process of moving in the direction of fixing that, and because several of us have made it clear that these are really important objectives to achieve, and I'm very concerned about the Southeast Ridge. And after all, it's the 5 of those parcels are in one ownership. So the more we can do the sooner we can get handle on what we need to do to protect that as best we can, the better off we'll be, so far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
And if I could just ask staff to lay out what the process is, is this going to go to a subcommittee of the city council, or where will this go in terms of moving forward with, if we were to make any ordinance changes?
You asking me?
Whoever on city staff would like to answer this question.
I'm not sure what you're asking for.
So I'm asking, we've laid out, both Ray and I have put in writing, our concerns or potential issues regarding the ridgeline ordinance and other policies that are in the general plan but not necessarily in the ordinances, and where, what I'm asking is what body is going to be the first to hear this, and what would the process be?
Well, absent any other direction from the council, then the council as a whole would hear it.
Okay, so it wouldn't, I was thinking it might have gone to the planning issues subcommittee. That would be Terry and me, because we've been looking at other ordinances.
Right, and at this point, there's no, I think you looked at more fully baked ordinances, kind of fine-tuned some stuff. At this point, we have, I think, a kind of a process of creating some sort of white paper and outlining a lot of broad issues for council discussion and direction. I wouldn't be surprised out of that process if the council directs it to a subcommittee, but at this point that hasn't happened.
Okay, I'm wondering if, since Ray and I are the two that have actually, put in writing our thoughts on this, if we might want to create an ad hoc subcommittee that looks at these types of issues in particular.
Well, you could certainly bring that up with your other council members. I do know that while they may not have put things in writing, I've heard them verbalize various issues and concerns.
Okay.
Can I make 2 other points on this? One, Lori, on your last sentence, I think in your memo you didn't really not want the word "not" there. Additionally, in response to public testimony, we should consider amending the ordinance regarding lot coverage so interior courtyards are included in square footage and you wrote are not included in square footage. So, yeah, okay, just want to make that really important correction. And then one of the things, a couple of things on what you wrote both of you wrote that I wanted to make commentary on was one that, and really actually this is in yours, where you quote policy number 83 that urges the city to maintain the visual beauty of the mountain, the ridgelines, the hilltops, wildlife, and plant habitat, including the Brisbane Acres. But one thing that's very important that we now know much more than we did in 1994, the vital importance of not just maintaining the visual beauty, but the living habitat. And in maintaining that, the ridgelines are not just about how they look. The ridgelines are incredibly important for example, the mating scenario of the Calliope butterfly. They do not do that without the ridgelines. And so preserving the ridgelines is not just about the view, not just about the aesthetics, but it is definitely about the biology of maintaining the living habitat. So I just really, really want to make it clear that it's not just about someone's view.
Yeah,
It
no,
really,
I fully
really
agree with that. As
is
you know.
about the ecology and the
Yeah.
habitat.
And I think even it was in the minds of those of us on the council at that time when this was put together. I mean, we thought of that.
Yeah,
I mean, we knew of that then, because that was after, all the HCP had been put in place and the Calliope mating habits were, we all knew that.
yeah.
So,
So-
that's was a part of the thinking of protecting the natural ridgelines. Now, as you correctly point out, not just for aesthetic reasons, but for the full ecological habitat reasons.
Yeah. That's it for me.
Okay. So,
Except Rome is burning while we pontificate.
again, this goes back, I think, to that, my question and the sort of overall lack of tenure on this committee. What can we do?
Besides a letter with a policy recommendation.
Yes. Is that all you would like from us right now, or would you like us to form a subcommittee to start looking at this in more depth? I mean, what can we do for the council on this matter?
On the ridgelines, the views, and just the letter?
On this issue, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that personally, from my point of view, in terms of what I've already expressed my concerns are, it would be great if the letter would say a little bit more rather than just this one issue, that it would look at the broader ecological issues, like you just said, Michelle.
Yeah.
It would support, what some of us are, the two of us anyway, are trying to see happen. And so rather than just talk about this one issue, which I think you have our agreement on, it's all part of a broader issue of how we protect the Brisbane Acres and the habitat and the vistas and the ecology. I mean, it's all. And so you can't say everything, but at least you can broaden it out a little bit more than just this one particular issue.
Okay.
That'd be my request anyway.
All right. Can I have does the committee feel it would be a good idea to have a subcommittee, at least do the first draft of this letter?
Yeah, I will.
All right, and I'd love for our boys to come, one of our boys to help you out, Michelle, because...
I'd be more than happy to do it.
Okay.
Not on very many things.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Can I ask a quick question? Well, before we lose our liaison here, we've gone over a lot of things, talked about a lot of different things, and you guys need us to look at a lot of different things. And as I look at some of the things that we've talked about, we don't have a time frame or a priority on any of these things at this point. The only thing I really kind of got was that the questions about the survey we don't really have to think about until 2015 when they're actually starting to put together questions for the survey. I did kind of hear some urgency when we were talking about a energy action plan. So that sounded to me like it was kind of important, so maybe that should go towards the top. We have so many things on our agenda every month that, I mean, I think, what was it, 2 months ago, we had to have 2 meetings and divide them in half. I think we need, as a committee, we need to prioritize what we're looking at to tailor what you guys want done. Otherwise, we're just spinning our wheels over here thinking about things, dreaming, when we should be, this is what we need to do. So it sounded to me like the energy plan was kind of important. Is that the first thing and most important thing, or a sustainability definition with education, or the education plan, or?
Before you reply, I'd like to add to that that I think this is a good time for you to say anything that you want to say, to communicate to us in general about anything and everything. So.
It's a broad question.
We need to know specifically about our priorities, but we also want to hear from you on anything else that's.
Well, yeah, what your priorities are for
Yeah.
us.
It didn't come up yet.
Yeah.
What we're doing, what we're not doing,
You want me to go, or you want to go?
Okay. So, when we talked, I agree. We talked about some ideas that we thought maybe you should be studying or doing that weren't on this list. And the one too that Ray had thought of, I'll let him talk more about him. But he said that annually the committee should be doing a vegetation management plan and a list of accomplishments.
Those are reports to the council.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you mean by a vegetation management plan? I mean, I know what it means to me, but I don't know what it means in terms of this committee. Yeah, no.
That's all right.
Every year, this committee, since we started acquiring all the property in the Brisbane Acres, there's an appropriation for the vegetation management. That is the maintenance and care and the preservation of those properties. I mean, it's our responsibility to make sure that the habitat is protected, and we do so with best we can with the vegetation management plan that I'm sure some of you have seen, because we do it every year. And there's a plan as to what kind of invasives should we go after, and what kind of mapping, and all that sort of thing. And that's an annual responsibility. And then the other annual, and that's spelled out in the charge, I think. And then the other annual responsibility is the report, and this all comes to the council because it's a budgetary matter. And then also there's a report of accomplishments, which is the annual report that you list what you've done and what you're planning to do and so forth. And that brings my response right to the prioritizing of a work plan, which I fully agree, and I think that has been done in the past, and that needs to be done in order to have a sense of accomplishment of, okay, this is what we're going to do first, and we'll get that done, and then we'll move on to the next. And I mean, that's how any committee gets anything accomplished, is by setting a strategy for getting to various places by various dates and so forth. And certainly getting an energy action plan in place, sooner rather than later is a high priority. I certainly agree with that. So a work plan is a good idea. When I was on the committee, we always had a work plan, and I think some of you have been part of creating those work plans, and so we just need to, but it has to be updated and changed and revised, and okay, these things we've accomplished, but this is what we still need to do, and this comes first, second, third, that sort of thing, and it's pretty standard, and all of you understand that very well, and so we look forward to you're doing that, and I know that the mayor, Clark Conway, who was, of course, the founder of this committee, has on a number of occasions said that, the best work we get from any committee and commission by far is the Open Space and Ecology Committee work. I mean, there's nothing that comes close to the depth and the thoughtfulness that goes into your recommendations. And so when you do something, the council really looks forward to it, and it's very high probability that it will be approved, because we know it's been really carefully researched, thought through, and consistent values that the council shares. So you are an important committee to us, and we need your input, because we can't, as Michelle points out, we're already gone past midnight every meeting, and that's why we rely on people like yourselves to do this part that we just don't have the time to do, and we really appreciate it greatly.
I've been on the committee for 2.5 years, including serving as the chair for a year, and I haven't seen a vegetation management plan that we've done, and I haven't seen a report of our accomplishments either. So I think we would.
Something slipped through the cracks then, I guess.
When?
Last fall.
We'll start.
Last fall, staff presented it to us, and we reviewed it, and we approved it.
Boy, I don't remember. I must have been in drafty IR land.
I know.
Can I get a
I
copy?
do remember those when I served on the committee, and
Oh, no, I know. I just don't remember.
Lisa left. Remember Lisa Pontecorvo?
Yeah.
So maybe it was something that was on her radar, and who knows?
So could I see the last 2 vegetation management plans that we've done?
Send them out an email, Natalie,
Yeah.
just so that we can get back on the.
I found the last one. I mean, when Ray mentioned it at our group meeting, it was the first time that I've heard of vegetation management plan and achievement report at the end of the year. So I went and I was like, let me find these things. So I sent some of them to Karen already. I definitely found, I think last year or 2 years ago. So I'll send you whatever I can find.
And the last report of accomplishments as well. So we know where to pick up.
In the past, I believe the vegetation management plan has been recommended by a consultant, who looks at the acres and says these are the ecological priorities that need to be protected, and they come in. Generally, somebody comes and talks to the committee about that.
I remember that.
So that's really all that's involved in the vegetation management plan. I mean, we don't write it per se.
Okay.
We just approve it usually.
Okay. Is that Mike Forbear? Or,
Has been.
well, let's see his handsome face here soon with the plan. He's...
Stuart had mentioned working with a consultant. I don't remember his name now.
Peter Steeler?
Yes.
Has, okay. Peter is,
No, it wouldn't be. Don't think it would be Peter, but you can look into that.
Well, if the last one
It
was
is
last
true
fall,
that,
we should be looking
we
at it again
usually
right now.
Do have some outside expert assistance on this. But it is something that, in the past anyway, the staff really put together with outside assistance, and usually it's somebody from one of the firms that specializes in controlling invasive species and critical habitat, and there was another person that specialized in mapping, and those all contributed to what we could do within a projected budget.
and we have a budget?
Mm-hmm.
How much?
I think it's $14,000.
Yeah, something like around $15,000 a year.
Okay. Let's get to weed pulling.
And I'm sorry, is that 15,000 for the consultant or for the consultant and the work?
For the vegetation management plan, and usually the consultants have not, cost that much because these people are, in most cases, been dedicating years of their lives to San Bruno Mountain, so they're not looking for a whole lot of money, just enough.
And they know
And
what
a lot.
what needs to be done and where.
Right.
Okay.
So there are a few things that I've been thinking about that the committee might want to take a role in. One, we're actually going to have a subcommittee, an economic development subcommittee on in a week or two. There's the Sierra Club has the Cool Cities program, which deals with carbon emissions, and you can find more information on the Sierra Club's website about the specifics. But when I reached out to the Sierra Club representative, she thought that the Open Space and Ecology Committee might be a good place to have as a forum for starting this group within the city. A lot of other cities have them. So we're still at the exploratory phase where we're going to be meeting with the Economic Development Subcommittee and seeing if this is a program that we might be interested in, and it may come forward in the future to perhaps the Open Space and Ecology Committee.
So I'm not making the connection between Economic Development Committee and Sierra Club Cool Cities.
Yeah, well, I didn't make that connection at first myself. It wasn't something that I had suggested, but what was explained to me was that, the Cool Cities program looks at environmental practices, which, they also look at, ways of encouraging economic development, but in an environmental way, and affordable housing issues. And, it's not quite clear to me exactly that it belongs in economic development, but that's just where it's going, where the person who's from the Sierra Club is going to come and talk to us
Okay.
in a week
It's a
or
green
so.
economy thing.
But I don't think that the program would be housed there.
Okay.
Probably make more sense to go through the Open Space and Ecology Committee, since it's about reducing carbon emissions. So stay tuned for that.
might
Wetlands
need a joint
restoration in
committee.
Crocker Park. What was that?
Oh, I was just saying we might need a joint committee.
A joint committee of,
Economic
perhaps it might be a
and
joint
OSEC.
committee.
Wetlands yeah.
We'll learn more about it
Yeah.
in a week. Wetlands restoration of Crocker Park. I know Mountain Watch has been doing a lot of work in that, and I'm wondering, I'm not familiar with what, if anything, the committee has been doing in that regard.
Nothing so far,
Okay.
other than, wanting it,
Okay.
but we haven't formally discussed that at all.
Okay. And then I understand the green building ordinance will be being updated, and I assume that'll come again before the Open Space and Ecology Committee, as it did in the past review. When I was on the committee, we reviewed it. That was the original ordinance. I don't know if the language updates are going to be to the level of needing your committee's review or not, but that may come before you. I already mentioned my interest in having the committee encourage in some way, solar panel residential purchases and commercial incentives for installing solar panels and electronic vehicle charging stations. And that may come through the energy action plan. One thing you may want to put on your radar is there's going to be a rain barrel program that CCAG and BASCWA is going to be rolling out soon. I read an article about it, and I know members of, I think, your committee in the past or the public have mentioned it, that they're interested in that program or in that technology, to be able to capture rainwater for irrigation.
Natalie, we had that at the community festival, but I don't think the rest of this committee has seen it. Could you please include that in our packet, at least for our informational purposes? Thank you.
And then the last thing is sea level rise. I am a member of a task force that was formed by Dave Pine, Rich Gordon, and Jackie Spear, county-wide, that's looking at creating a vulnerability assessment and also options for funding for planning for sea level rise. And I know the task force organizer said that they're looking for people with technical backgrounds to be present at these meetings. So I'm going to try to bring in some city staff, probably our city engineer or someone from the planning department, to be able to be a part of that. But it also might be a good idea for someone from Open Space and Ecology to be a liaison, if to be aware that these meetings are going on and to be able to report back to your committee, because I think it's something that's related to your goals as well.
Yeah, our city engineer, he's used to standing in deep water.
So there's going to be another meeting coming up, I think, on October 23rd, and I'll get that information to city staff. But it's exciting because Santa Clara County and other counties have sea level rise task forces, but so far we don't have one in San Mateo County, and yet our county is the most at risk for economic damage if there's 3 feet or so of sea level rise by the end of the century, which is what is predicted. Yeah. So those are some of the things that I've thought of. I don't know if Ray has anything else to add.
Right?
The only other thing I thought of was in reference to a conversation I heard earlier, and that is the whole question of the energy action plan and you get the biggest bang for the buck from energy efficiency. But it's also important to think about renewable energy and how we can facilitate that. And there are lots of different possibilities, one of which, of course, is helping people put solar panels on their own roofs. Another is how we facilitate it in the businesses. There are some people in business putting basically solar farms on top of big warehouses where they got a lot of space and they're not using it at all. There's also the question of the community solar, putting it on empty land. There's the question of solar in the Baylands, and how much. And I know you raised the question of, is it okay to talk about things like that? And so from my point of view, sure. Even though some of the panels might go on land somewhere, that's okay. I mean, the concern that the council had about limiting your role was strictly in reference to specific kinds of applications that property owners would make that would go primarily to the planning department and the planning commission, and we were trying to avoid duplication in those kinds of things so that you're not looking at a particular project. But when it comes to general concepts, that's fine. The way I read it anyway.
Yeah, I think that we need to work to get the jump on general things before they become specific plans.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming and clarifying so many things. I feel like we haven't seen you guys here for a while. The last time you were here was you and Cliff.
So I'm going to needle you guys just a little bit before you get out the door. So you've given us some wonderful things to think about and some wonderful things to add to our priority list. And just because I'm a pain in the tush, I'm going to ask you if there are any things you would like to eliminate from or deprioritize from our priority list, because we're already in the position of not being able to accomplish what we want.
70% of it.
So if you could come back to us with that, or if you've already thought about it, what are some of the things you feel maybe we don't need to work on so much that are on our list, our work plan?
Or do you want to wait till we reorganize and reprioritize the document that we've been working on?
That would be fine, too.
One suggestion I have is that I presume you're going to be putting together a work plan.
Well, the work plan has us doing everything.
Yeah, but I mean a work plan that prioritizes with timeframes.
We're working on it.
We're working on it.
Yeah, and I assume you will need to work with staff to get something of that nature together, and I think both of us would be happy to take a look at that and respond.
Okay.
I think it's easier for us to respond to that kind of thing than it is to just sort of pick things out of the air. I think what we'd like to see is this is a strategy we propose, and these are our priorities. You got any problems with that?
Yeah. All right. We're very good at growing tasks. We're not so good at pruning them. So your help would be appreciated, I think.
We still have the approval of the minutes, and then we're done? Because
Yeah.
we're losing them fast.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go. Either we motion to approve or you guys.
I've got one correction.
Okay. I'd be just as happy to do approval next time
Yeah.
if you guys want. I don't feel that that's a critical issue. And we certainly don't need our liaisons here for that.
Yeah, you can do that
Very
next
much.
Thank
You
you
can
very
do that
much
next
for
month
all the
if you're
good work you do.
Losing your committee.
Thank you. Move to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Okay, let's go.
All right.
5-year-old will not.
Yeah, that was amazing. Couldn't believe it.
You are
No,
No idea for the
you were
first
so
It was a choice
good,
of either not coming. or
and I'm so proud of you. What a very mature young lady you are.
So I have something for you.
You did great.
Thank you very much for doing that.
Parent, I understand, and I'm not sure my son would have been happy.
Clark was very pleased.
Let's see, I haven't heard from him. I'm like, get to him?
Yeah, I've seen him twice now,
Oh, good.
yesterday
How
and
is,
today.
how's he
And
look?
he's still weak, but he seems okay.
Sophia, next time you have to make
Remind you, I got
okay?
reimbursement from Ray.
Make a comment next time,
$10.
okay?
Wanting to go to
Oh,
No.
Reimbursement for what?
$10, fine. Great.
Okay.
Oh, no, wait, I need to give you change then.
All
All
I got is.
right, let's see if we got change in here.
Natalie, you still need to get stuff out of
Randy,
my
you just
car.
came for the entertainment value? You and Clay?